Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Anxious Lad podcast. My name is Matt Keenan. Thank you so much as usual for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Joining me all the way from Vermont is life coach and psychologist Jason Frishman. Jason, how are you doing?
Oh, fantastic. It's great to be here, man. We've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while trying to get it in the calendar. All right. So I first and foremost really appreciate your time in jumping on and having a chat with me. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And, I love what you've been doing. And really, we talked several months ago. And I was saying earlier, I'm just
Mhm.
really glad that more and more men are open to this kind of conversation and to having conversations like this. So, lots of gratitude to you for making it more public.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's been great. I didn't know what to expect at the beginning. I'll be honest. I know it was a few months ago when we first spoke, and I think I only had maybe one or two episodes done at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and like that, trying to go out into the market, as it were, and look for guys to come on the show and have a conversation, and I guess show that vulnerability and be open and everything else on the podcast. Was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning, but I think it's it's grown some legs since the start. So it's great, and we're now, what are we, 12, 13 episodes in, and every one of the lads who have come on have been absolutely fantastic in highlighting, the issues that they went through with their mental health. And really, I guess the whole point of it is just trying to change that narrative. It's just trying to change that social expectation that men shouldn't talk, getting guys talking and stuff is, yeah, it's fantastic. I'm absolutely loving every minute of it now, I have to say.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, that's so much about the work I do as well as changing the narrative. I'm glad you used that phrase. My training is narrative therapy, or some of my training. And so the whole idea is, how do
Right.
we change ourselves through the stories that we live every day and that we tell about ourselves? And so, this idea that men can, we have the capability to talk about ourselves, to know ourselves and to
Yeah.
share ourselves with other people, it shouldn't be that radical, but it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because I spoke about it the other day when I recorded another episode, and I'd love to get your take on it as well from a psychologist perspective. So the narrative now, right, as it is, say, is that men shouldn't talk, we don't talk, man up, don't cry, all of that kind of stuff. And is it society that teaches us that? Is it the home life that teaches? Is it our parents? Is it, the environment that we grow up in? Um, what's kind of your take on that social aspect of the stigmas that are associated, I guess, to men's mental health?
Wow. I mean, we're jumping right into it. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's sort of, it's all of the above. And, so, we get taught it from birth in our families. We see it in media, movies. There is a cultural narrative that guides men on how to become, or boys on how to become men. And frankly, for 100 years, it's been pretty unbalanced. I believe it hasn't been the entire, we're not being told the whole story. Um, so, for me, I think part of this is, we have this narrative of individualism and, being able to be the leader and the king and all of these things. And these stories, which are not told in their entirety, are
Mm.
models for young men and for boys that really teach us to disconnect, to dominate. Where it's important to be in charge and aggressive and dominate and be have power and control, and yet all of this is what weakens men, our relationships, our culture. It's quite damaging. Have you heard of the hero's journey?
No.
Okay. You have, though. I bet you have. So let me tell you a quick narrative, okay? The hero gets either called away from his home or kicked out of his home to go on some great journey, right? He's helped along the way. He goes through all sorts of trials and tribulations. He climbs the mountain. He battles the dragon, and he finds the treasure, and then has to go all the way back
Yeah.
home. And when he gets home, he's either unrecognized and kicked out again, or recognized and celebrated as the savior and who fixes the whole world. Sound familiar?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's every Pixar movie. It's every big blockbuster movie.
Yeah.
It's Star Wars, it's Lord of the Rings. And many have studied, I studied this, I wrote my dissertation on this, right? Many have studied this and talked about how it's been called the monomyth. It's the one story. Well,
Right. Okay.
and so, from the first 15 years of my career, I developed curriculum and interventions based on this story because it's a nice model. Like, things are going wrong, we have inner dragons to battle. We gain strength, and we change through ordeal. All of that. The problem is, in my narrative therapy training, we're trained to question taken for granted stories. So even though I love this story, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, I love Lord of the Rings, right? Because I love the story, even though I sort of had I had to do my due diligence and question it, right? So for
Yeah.
all of the stories, for years I did workshops where I asked everyone, and with new clients, what's your favorite adventure story, real or fiction? And it was always, thousands of people asked this, it was always some version of the hero's journey, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What about all the guys who aren't off battling dragons, which is most of us? What about the guys who are home changing diapers and washing dishes and keeping the fires burning and doing all those things? And I found that even though I love the hero's journey, the fact that it is everywhere is actually quite damaging to men. And it gives this message that if we're not epic, if we're not legendary, we're not good enough. And so this idea, who are the characters in the hero's journey? The king, the prince, the villain, right? They're all of these like archetypes that are quite powerful, but really quite one-sided. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they're not, they're shallow characters. They're not, and so by seeing this, it's like, all right, so your question around men and not sharing stories and not sharing our emotions and not knowing where we come from, it's not all of this, but we have had hundreds of years of this story being dominant, and we don't have stories where men stay home and take care of kids and cry when their kid gets hurt, or support things in a different way than bringing home the bread, being the breadwinner, or those things. And so a lot of the work I do is really around elevating the mundane in everyday life. Like, ordinary life has magic, has adventure. Every day there is, if we find the meaning and the value in our like cleaning the toilet,
Yeah.
then life becomes more meaningful, and we can be more in touch with who we are and how we feel and our relationships and whatnot. And so it's challenging work, but it is this idea of we're looking to rewrite or rediscover men's stories that allow us to be more than just a hero or prince, a magician, a warrior. Those stories are very limited.
Yeah. Just to be more human.
Yeah. Being more connected, more in partnership with others seems to be, for me, where we get more strength.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say, you kind of look at, the guys who are at home, who are more hands-on now with, the kids in the house, with the raising of the kids. Go back even to my parents' generation. Dad worked 6 days a week, came home, mum was the homemaker. She was the one who did all the stuff for school. She was the one who did, the cooking, the cleaning, all of that kind of stuff. So very pink and blue jobs almost, I guess, around the house, right? And I even see it now, and it kind of annoys me when you see and even again from a social perspective, right? When you hear, and this isn't having a go at women, it's just it's the narrative that's in society at the moment. Some people say, well, where's the hubby tonight, or where's the husband tonight, whatever the case is. Oh, he's babysitting. Or people would say to me if they see me with our little ones, oh, you're babysitting today. I'm like, I'm not like, you wouldn't say that to a mother. Do you know
Never.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's more acceptable to say to a dad, in that, oh, you're babysitting today, or you're on baby duty. I'm like, no, I'm just being a dad. I'm not babysitting. I'm not minding the child. Like, obviously I'm minding the child, but so even those kind of social interactions, I think, can be quite damaging to a certain extent then as well, because it's almost like we're doing a favor by
Right.
minding or babysitting the child for the afternoon, but you wouldn't dare. Nobody ever takes that expectation of a mother. It's just like, oh, you're being mum, Whereas we tend to be, as I said, on the flip side of that, men we're just babysitters, or we're just minding the kids.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And that is also damaging 100%. It's all of those, um, all of the expectations, there's equal
Mm-hmm.
expectations that are damaging to moms. And this is why we need to work together as
Absolutely, yeah,
to do this. I took the day
yeah.
off a couple weeks ago and just sort of like took my kids out of school because I wanted to like surprise them and have a special day. And I swear, one of the people who I don't know this person, but like I know I've seen him around town for a long time. We chat when
Mm-hmm.
we're online or whatever. They saw me during the day with my kids and they asked if my wife and I had split up and if this was my visiting time.
Jesus.
Right? And like I've kind of always felt that like if during I've had a flexible job where I can do more with the kids during the day and no,
Yeah,
not I've only heard that once, but I have heard or I've felt like, oh, when I'm with the kids during the day, are like do people look at that weird or do people like and it's I'm often the only father at the playground or I'm the only dad who like one of the few dads that does pickup, right? Or those kinds of
mm-hmm.
things.
Yeah, yeah.
It absolutely is a challenge, but it's more this idea of like as men we have a responsibility to change some of this stuff. We have a responsibility to speak up,
Absolutely.
stand up around it, um, so that we become better partners.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, talk to me a little bit then about your group, your method in working with guys. So, obviously, look, you're a psychologist, you're a coach, but you also have the Journeyman program.
Yeah,
You help guys going through stuff in life. So, talk to me a little bit about Journeyman. Tell everybody what it is, what it's about, and I guess what differentiates it from maybe another coaching program or other coaches or whatever out there.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so the first thing is, yeah, Journeyman is the coaching program that I run, Journeyman, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll get to why I called it that in a minute because that's part of the basic philosophy. But a lot of it is, in many ways, it probably looks like coaching. I do group coaching calls, I do individual coaching calls, I have homework for them, things like that. But philosophically, the foundation that we stand on is, I think, radically different than a lot of other men's coaching. Um, Primarily because of what we were talking about earlier, the move from the hero's journey. So
Mm-hmm.
many
Yeah.
of
Okay.
the coaching programs out there embrace the hero's journey. And that's lovely. I have nothing, I'm not saying anything negative about that. But for us, the hero's journey is out there. People know it. They're there. The men's movement since the 80s has really glorified the hero, the king, the warrior, these archetypes in the men's movement. And yet there are other archetypes that are masculine that get pushed away. And so for the Journeyman program, one of the things that we do is that instead of like a hero's journey program where we all get together, we go somewhere, we do something, we make a challenge, we're changed, and we come home and, fix the household. I really recognize that men's dads' adventures are actually with their family and in their lives, right?
Okay.
So the adventure isn't with me. The adventure is in their life. And so that's philosophically very different. So what my favorite scenes in all of the books and movies that I read as a kid, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, those kind of things,
Mhm.
I realized they were never the swashbuckling sword dragon battles. I love those, don't get me wrong, but my favorite scenes were at the cantinas or the inns or the pubs, the taverns, right? And why do people go to those places? Because they're hungry or thirsty, because they got stories to
Yeah.
tell, because they want to share their stories. They need the camaraderie. They might need a bed.
Mhm.
They might need new equipment or gear. They might need a new mission or a quest. They might need information from the shady guy in the corner, right? And that's the gathering that I have always envisioned Journeymen to be, which is men come from their adventurous lives. They may not even they don't usually realize that they're adventurous lives, but they come from their everyday lives. They walk into the inn and they can let their shoulders down and be with other men. And we share stories, we share
Mhm.
skills, there's some training involved. But for the most part, it's a space where men can gather to get connected with other men and then to learn skills and to recognize that their life is an adventure and life is a journey and what that means. And so then they get skills to go practice these things, connecting with their kids, connecting with their partners, connecting at work. And they try it. They go off and they try the adventure, and then they come back and they're like, "Oh, you got to hear this," and they're able to share stories, right? And so for me, there's this curriculum where instead of the hero's journey, I call it foundational adventures. And we basically go through a framework of really developing these foundational adventures where men learn about core values and we have practices and strategies to live those values, right? A lot of values are often
Mhm.
very general and they're I care about the earth, right? Which is lovely, don't get me wrong, but what I help them do is take the values that are up here and really like
Mhm.
what do they look like in action every day? And how would you like live those values in your life every day? And so helping them do that and then understanding the obstacles that get in the way, whether it's anxiety, depression, relational issues, anger, all of these things. And with that, they get the training to go off and try these adventures in a different way. And then the final part of our program is what I call the telling, because who we are is really based on the stories we tell about ourselves and that are told about us. So I have
Mhm.
men begin to share their adventures. They've been doing it the whole program, but they share it with their loved ones. They share it with other men. They share it with themselves in a way. They do some writing. And so this idea is that we level up our characters through going on an internal home foundational adventure. And men have typically found they're closer with their partners, they're closer with their kids, they're achieving more at work, they feel better and more sort of present to the work they're doing, and they do the work. Like this is one of those things where it's really we get creative, we laugh about things, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so one of the things that's been really beautiful is really watching these men um, go through the program, find the treasure, the goal that they've been working on, and then realize, all right, I got that. And now there's this other thing in my life. I want to move that. So they start to broaden the work they're doing where it might have been, I want to be close with my kids. Great. Now I want to be closer with my partner. Oh, now I want to like share this with the world. And and so there is some really powerful activism starting with these guys right at home. Being a connected dad is being an activist. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually you just kind of touched on it there, and that was something I was going to ask you. So I could imagine you might have a couple of guys who may join one of the groups, right? Because he's like as you say, he's got depression or he's got anxiety, and that's going to have an impact on maybe your relationship with your wife or your work or your kids, or whatever. So in his mind, he's turning up because he wants to fix this one thing. But I imagine that going through that journey then with you guys, that actually there's a ripple effect that's improving most aspects of his life then without even realizing. And it's only then he's starting to see change in different areas. And then that realization of the new growth that he's going through is having a positive, obviously a positive impact on everything else. Is there a time then where you kind of see that happen, that change happening within that realization with the guys?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny towards like I'm finishing up a group right now and around this point, so let's say the latter third of the program, I actually kind of warn all of my guys because right about now, right in the framework, and it happens almost every single time, like a light switch goes and it's like, oh, I could do this at work, or oh, connecting with my buddies is different. Like, oh, and I had one guy. It's funny. He called me up because after guys go through the program, I make it really known that like I'm still a resource for them. We meet, we have an open meeting every Tuesday, and one guy reached out and he said, I'd love to share with you what's been going on since I finished Journeyman. And he's someone who explicitly came to be more connected with his kids, right? And he was really happy. He gave me a great testimonial. He felt like it was amazing. But what he said to me afterward, like we got on a call and he said, Jason, your program has to come with a Surgeon General's warning because it shakes everything up. And so here it was, his goal was to connect with his kids. He did that, and it was so powerful that it removed some of the blocks from the rest of his life. And what he realized was,
Okay.
oh, now that I'm getting along and connected with my kids, I have to look at my relationship with my wife. He's like, we haven't looked at that in 10 years. And either we're going to not look at it and I think we're going to get divorced, or we're going to look at it and we're going to do the work. And it was powerful. And he said, it's awesome and it's hard and it's heartbreaking and it's really difficult, but it's totally worth it, right? It's a treasure. So the last piece about the distinction between Journeyman and maybe other groups that I've seen, a lot, and this isn't to put programs down, but a lot of programs that I've seen promise you the world. They really do. They
promise you.
They promise you the world. In 90 days, you're going to get paid, you're going to get laid, and everything's going to change and be better.
Yeah.
I've been a shrink. I've been a psychologist for 25 years, and I know that doesn't work. That's, like if things dramatically change overnight, that's awesome. I've seen it. I'm not going to say it never happens, but typically you need to do the work, and it's a process. Right? I tell my clients, it didn't take me overnight to get this belly. It's not going to take me overnight to get rid of it. Right?
And that's fair. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and so, these promises that I see coaching programs make, it's great. And I've looked through them. I've gone through them. I've seen it and they're wonderful. But what we do at Journeyman is I say, listen, in 3 months, I'm going to help, I meet with all my guys individually first before we start the group. And I said, listen, let's find one goal, one thing that at the end of 3 months, you're going to say, you know what? I'm so glad this was the best decision I made. It opened up the doors. And so one treasure that is achievable within 3 months, excuse me. And one of the reasons our program is called Journeyman Foundations, because they learn the foundations so that at the end of the 3 months, when they've gotten that treasure and then they realize, oh, shoot, there's some other things I want to do, they have the skills to do it again. And in my belief, stories are always cyclical. So you hit a story, you go through the story, and then you wind up back and you can do it again. And so I tell guys like they can go through the program again, they can use the skills on their own, they can come to the free open house. We're always going to be supporting these foundational journeys. But we're not going to promise that in 3 months, like everything's going to be great and you're going to be happy for the rest of your life. This life is a journey.
Yeah, for sure. And it is like, I know now, even from my experience with, I guess over the last 6-8 months in like my echo chamber now, say on social media between Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of those kind of things, I'm following a lot more people, and you're seeing all of these coaching adverts kind of popping up and like that. You're right. There's to a certain degree, a lot of them are kind of like, you know, in 2 weeks you'll be this, or in 3 months time, you know, you'll look like Arnold Schwarzenegger did when he won Mr. Universe, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And getting that physical and mental strength back. And as you say, right, yes, it can happen overnight to a certain degree, but I think the guys who make that change overnight or very rapidly have a very specific mindset, say, for argument's sake. Whereas for the general population, you know, for the most part, it is a long process in making that change and identifying where the change needs to happen. I know even from my experience, like it's been the best part of 2 years for me in where I was originally with the mental health battles that I was going through up until now. Do you know what I mean? And I've done loads of different types of work with, you know, meditation, Qigong, breathing exercises, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, CBT, NLP. I've probably ticked every box, and I've kind of dipped my toe in all of it, because I don't think it's almost like a horses for courses scenario, isn't it? There's no one fix for everything. You got to tap into the individual and kind of see what they respond to, and then pull that out of them. And it's only by going through loads of different scenarios and go different types of therapy, maybe, that you find what it is works for you, and then how you build your own growth then on top of that.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I can imagine from your side, because you do it in a group setting and you've got guys coming together, you know, it's not just a one-on-one experience. It's a group of lads coming together and sitting down, and there's shared experiences. There's wins that everybody is sharing together. There's ups and downs that everybody is sharing together. And I can imagine that could be quite enlightening for the guys to go through then as well.
It's amazing, actually. And that's the other thing that I was going to say, is that a lot of groups that I work on, that I've read about and I've studied in coaching programs, there are like a group for anger management, or a group for, you know, relating to your wife, or a group for, you know, and that's great, because of the whole philosophy of Journeyman, which, like I said, your adventure is at home. We're just the inn that you get to hang out in and do some things. Every guy has their own treasure. So it's a very interesting thing, because it's group work, but I meet with every guy individually in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, so they can really focus on what they're working on. But like what you're saying, the beauty of it is every guy comes in and has their own treasure, and they're all different. But every time one of the guys starts talking about the challenges or the obstacles or the things that he's working on, I see every other guy in the room nodding and being like, yeah. Like, the taglines for Journeyman that I'm playing around with is, your work is our work, your journey is our journey. You know, because that is, you know, someone comes in and they're talking about having trouble with their teenage son, and someone else on the other side of the room who doesn't have a teenage son is still like getting something out of that, because we have such similarities in our lives, and it doesn't have to be we're doing it alone, even if we're on our own journeys, right? We're off, and then we come together, we give each other support. And so, you know, your work is our work. That's the motto. That's what we do.
And that's an interesting point you make there, right? In that, I guess from a mental health perspective, right? How we end up with, what's the word I'm looking for? How we get to that point where we can't take it anymore, and we have to do something about it, right? For me, it was a full-on breakdown. I dropped to the floor in tears at one point, probably after another argument with the whole family, and I'm kind of shouting at my wife and kids, I don't know what's wrong with me, and I'm floods of tears. My 17-year-old son at the time literally picked me up off the floor, and I've learned since then that men will only come out and talk about it when they get to that point, right? They've literally hit that brick wall then. for me, and if you've listened to the first two episodes of the podcast, you know that was the beginning of what was going to turn out to about a year from hell, with the medication and trying to understand what was going on and everything else. But one of the things I've said to the guys who've been on the show before is that we all have this journey, right? We all get to a point in our lives where it's kind of too much. And that may be depression, it may be anxiety, it may be because of, and again, if you've heard some of the other episodes, it may be because of sexual abuse, physical abuse, it may have been because of bereavement, it may have been because of whatever the case is, you know, a parent dying, somebody dying by suicide. It could have been just loneliness and going out and all of a sudden you realize you're an alcoholic and you have to pull yourself back out of it, and you've hit that. So our journey to there is different in every single one of us. But then I think we tend to suffer in the same way, right? We don't talk for a start. We may turn to drugs and alcohol,
or this,
but it's
or this.
it.
Drugs,
Yeah,
alcohol,
yeah.
swiping.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Yeah, becoming addicted to technology and stuff, and just almost reclusing away and living online then, or whatever, living a different life online. But we tend to suffer that in the same way, as I said, right? Because you've alcohol, you've drugs. But I think the most common thing with blokes, with men, is because we don't know how to express it, because we don't know how to talk about it, we end up becoming like this coiled spring, just ready to pop. And that anger, that aggression that comes out. So when you talk with one guy who wants to have a better relationship, say with his son, it may be because he doesn't know how to communicate. So therefore there's a breakdown in communication, obviously, with them. So there could be, aggression and tension between them. But the guy in the corner who doesn't have a son, but has the same anger inside him, he's probably having a relationship issue with his wife or his daughter or with somebody in work. And as you say, everybody can grow from that shared experience then.
Absolutely, and to me, that is the thing that I get chills thinking about it, because, in my life, I've been fortunate and really privileged enough that I have a group of male friends that I've had since I was a teenager, and we're all over the country. We get together a couple times a year, and we do sit and talk about this stuff, and it saved my life. It really has. And that's, in many ways, that's what I want for other men or blokes, as you say. I think that word needs to get used more. But, absolutely. You're so right. There's like these men that I gather with, a couple times a year, we all very different. We have different philosophies, different values, different family makeups, all of that. But we've been buddies forever, and we've got this trust and we've got this love for one another. And because of that, we can share in ways that, like, like we'll all get back together and be like, oh, so and so's having a hard time. It's time for us to get together. Let's, we'll all meet up at someone's house, or we'll,
Yeah.
And, giving that, offering an inn for a bunch of men, a virtual inn for a bunch of men to do this. I said that my program is 3 months, but I often say it's 3-ish. Because I'm very flexible.
Right, okay.
While I have a curriculum and a framework, everybody knows that if the proverbial shit hits the fan, then like a guy can come in and say, listen, I really need to share some stuff. And if that takes the whole hour and we don't get to the framework, that's okay. We make room for that. Mm-hmm. Because, again, your work is our work. And that's really powerful, because I think that you're absolutely right. It's like we respond very similar because of these stories, right? We've got to be individualistic. We've got to be strong.
Yeah.
And as a result, there are similar pains, even though it looks different. It looks like anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. What I found working in my psychotherapy office, it's where a lot of these ideas came from, is that, as a result of the hero's journey and all of these socializations, it looks very different, but men have these common, underlying things of, I'm not good enough, I'm not epic, I'm not legendary,
Yeah.
Syndrome. All of these things are happening now. Confusion, like, I don't know how to be, I don't know how to be a man. I don't know,
Yeah.
right now more than ever, I think. and it's a good thing, but men are being called to task for patriarchal
Mm,
stuff. And even though it's like, wait a minute, I'm not a jerk, I'm not whatever, but I still have some responsibility that I have to be aware of. And in that sense, it starts
absolutely.
by
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
talking. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another interesting point then as well. So I was talking to two of the guys last night, um, previous guests of the show. We're recording a round table discussion that's going to go out as part of the podcast as well, but it's going to be the three of us just having a general chat, kind of about mental health and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were kind of talking about, and I kind of broached the subject with the two lads, was that on the one side, right, if the cliche is that society teaches us not to talk or tells us that we can't talk to somebody, right, about our problems, whatever else, then can the reverse be true? Then that we don't know how to actively listen at the same time.
Absolutely.
So
Wow. Yeah.
if
Great
I
point.
if I have a problem, right, and I have the courage to go and talk to a friend or to another guy or one of the lads, but they don't know how to have that conversation. They don't know what it is to be on the to be in that conversation with me, and then it's not their fault, right? They don't know how to have that conversation, right? So they're unsure of how to respond to what I'm saying. I can take that two ways. It could either be that, what's the fucking point in me talking to you? You're not listening anyway. And then I go back inside myself again,
Yeah.
or you could kind of understand where they're coming from and say, look, if this is too much, do you know what I mean? But I'd imagine it's the first, it's the exception is in the first part of that, where you can see a glazed face because they just don't know how to cope with that conversation. So they don't know what you want to hear. They don't know what you need to hear. Sometimes you don't need to hear that. You just need to sit up, just pretend you're listening. For the most part, that'd help, lads. But I get like, what's your take on that side of it? Because I guess it is, if we're not taught to talk, we're not taught to share. How the hell are we going to be able to listen to one of the lads that comes up to us?
Matt, that is such an amazing insight. That's so important. Because you're right. And I think, the thing I would add is not only do we not know how, but I think we've also been directly taught that that's wrong, right? It's gay. It's
Yeah.
feminine. It's what, don't be a woman, don't be a wuss, don't be like, we have been taught that having emotional connections with male friends is somehow less. It's horrible, right? Like having an emotional connection with a male cohort, a friend, is
Mm-hmm.
is made like it's compared to being a woman, which is somehow being less. I mean, that's mind blowing.
Being bad, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's again why I talk a little bit about how this is activism, like truly, like saying, like connecting with your mates. I'm going to start using your language now. Connecting with your mates, your friends, um, is radical. It is badass, like we were talking about earlier. Like it absolutely is. But we, yeah, we not only don't necessarily know how, but we're also uncomfortable with it, and we also like. I mean,
mm-hmm.
one of those, the buddies I mentioned earlier, he's been one of my closest friends since I'm 12 years old, and he's pretty open-minded. He's done this kind of work. I've done this kind of work, and it took us until our early 30s to even start to say something like "I love you," and even then, it was "I love you, man. I love you, man." And then
Yeah, yeah,
into our
yeah,
late
yeah,
30s, where it morphed into "I love you, brother. I love you, brother." We're now in our late 40s, and finally, I can say to him, like, "Look, man, look, not even man. See, look, thanks for talking to me. I love you. I really love you." Like, it took us 40 years, and we're pretty open minded to be able to say and hear that without being, uncomfortable or whatnot. Like, how many men are hearing from their fathers, "I love you," and are telling their kids, "I love you," and are
yeah, yeah,
listening. Like,
yeah.
so the listening and the speaking, I thank you. That's a really wonderful way of putting it. And it's not just we don't know how to speak, but we also don't really know how to listen for lots of reasons. And so, you know, having this ability to challenge this and to be different and to say, like, yeah, like without my buddies, like my buddy saved my life. I love him, like,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's really powerful. That's a really great way of thinking about it too, because in some ways that's one of the reasons why we have a group instead of individual work. A lot of men are more interested in doing individual work because it's scary to be in a group, but the group is really
yeah,
where
yeah,
this power comes from. I mean, goodness, it's really. I'm almost a man, but I'm trained in group therapy. I've run groups my whole life. But when I started Journeyman, I was so excited about the framework and the skills and the techniques that I'd forgotten about
yeah,
the
yeah.
power of this. And every guy, when I do feedback at the end of the program, without a doubt, every guy that's ever gone through Journeyman has said the community of guys in the room or on the screen looking back at me and nodding their
Mhm.
heads has been one of the most powerful things. And like I said, I'm embarrassed that I'm surprised about that, but I love it. It's so cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's brilliant I guess to get that feedback then as well from the guys. And as I said earlier, to kind of celebrate those wins with them. Do you know what I mean? I guess from a coaching perspective and from a group and community, for want of a better word, that you're building with these guys to be able to celebrate those wins with them, I guess must be incredible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a couple of guys. It's funny when I do initial calls with them, I've had a couple guys who say like, honestly, things in my life are doing all right. I really just need a group of like-minded guys to meet with and talk about, and I can't do it with my buddies, and I
Hmm.
really want to have that. Um, and they're in it. They jump right in with 2 feet. In fact, those guys are guys who often say to their friends, "Hey, come on, you need to join us and do this," which has been amazing to see, right?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the therapy world, I could never do that. Like I can't have friends bring friends to the group therapy, but in coaching, it's more powerful. It's
Yeah.
it's even more powerful. It's awesome. Oh yeah.
Deadly. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So there's definitely, I can say we'll probably end on this one, right? On this kind of topic or this note. So I can definitely see a shift happening in terms of men and men talking, right? And again, it may just be because of the kind of echo chamber I'm in across social media and stuff, the groups that I'm in, and the stuff that's popping up on my searches and on Google and the things that I'm seeing or whatever. So maybe everyone doesn't see this, but certainly from my perspective, I can see a change happening in that guys are willing to talk, they're willing to have a conversation, they're willing to be a little bit more vulnerable, I guess, than previous, years gone by or whatever. And what's interesting is there's a lot of private groups on Facebook, different mental health groups, dad groups, all of that kind of stuff. I moderate a couple of dad groups on Facebook, and guys will post it anonymously, and they'll ask the questions. But at least they're still asking the question. At least they're still putting it out there to get a thing, to get a response back, and to get some advice or some feedback about a certain situation or whatever. But a lot of the groups are still private. So whilst the conversation is happening to a certain degree, I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, but it almost feels like it's still kind of happening behind closed doors, in a sense. Does that make? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So what do we need to do? Where do we need to go to kind of bring this just right out into the open completely, where it does become a lot more socially acceptable for guys to have that conversation. Like if I know with my wife, if she's having a bad day or she's having a shitty time or whatever, she'll tell you a glass of wine and a conversation with two or three of her mates is like one of the best counseling sessions she's ever gone. But we don't do
No.
that. We don't have that. Do you know what I mean? So what do you think as men, like what do we need to do in order to get to that place? Because again, from a conversation I had with somebody last week, you can you can put it off and put it off as to a point, but you're going to snap at some point. It's going to get to a point where you will just snap. The mind, the body can only take so much, and you can say, oh, I'll power through, I'll be fine, I'm fine, it's grand, I'll work it out. You
Yeah,
won't. You will for a certain time, but you will hit a brick wall at some point, and that brick wall is going to hurt. So what do we need to do you think, as a society, as men, to just make this more commonplace, I guess?
good question. Well, first thing is you use the word fine. You know what fine means in my world? What it stands for?
Go on.
Fine is effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So if you're fine, tell me how fine you
You're really not.
are. So, but to answer your question, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, one, I'm not sure. That's the honest thing, is that I think we keep doing the work.
Okay.
Two, what you're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
I honestly think there are a lot. I've been on a lot of podcasts for fathers, for men, and whatnot. Very few of them are getting men to share their own stories. They're getting people like me who are experts and all of that, and that's lovely. I love being on it. I love talking about it, and I think this also helps
Yeah.
because it shares that the
Mm-hmm.
work is being done. But very few are bringing men on to talk about their own lives, and so what you're doing
Okay.
is putting a point on it. It's pulling the curtain across and showing this. I'd be curious, right? You're one of the most shared podcasts, right? I want to know how many are men and how many are women that are listening, right? So,
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean, actually, I can tell. Well, from some of the stats I can see, if they're true, the majority, I think it's 65, just over 65% are
that's
men.
great. See, then that's more.
Of my active listeners, but that's only through Spotify. I can see that because I use Anchor to upload it. So the stats coming through the Spotify accounts, basically, that's what I see are is it predominantly
That's
men.
great. I mean, and that's amazing because again, as men, we have to do the work. It's our responsibility, right?
Mhm.
The patriarchy has damaged everyone, women, men, blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
for sure.
And yet it is on us to really start to take care of ourselves and really, find a new story for men. And so, making it known that this is happening, right? The fact that you're doing this. Um, I have spent the last probably 6 months, meeting and talking to other men's coaches, not because I think it's good for the business, but because we need to start having a network of men who care and men who are doing this work. And,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
enough work for all of us that I don't care about that. It's not like I'm calling you because I'm looking for referrals. I'm calling you because I want to, I mean, shit. I'm sorry. I hope I can swear. Um, I can now say I have a
yeah. Okay.
friend across the world who cares about the same things as I do. Right. And
Yeah, yeah, for
so
sure.
by doing
Yeah,
that, in my life outside of work, I pass your podcast to a friend. I say, hey, listen to this. Or, so one is to continue to do the work. I think that's something as men we're good at. Let's keep doing it, right? Let's make this happen. But the other
yeah,
piece is letting others, letting women, letting our kids know that we're doing the work, that it matters, right? Like,
hmm,
my sons are 14 and 11, and they know everything about Journeyman. And every time I post something, they knew I was doing your podcast today. And they don't do it because I'm just like bragging. They know because this is value. This is a value. This is something that we think is really important.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
My father he's retired, a social worker, very conscious, very conscientious, and yet, and an amazing father, did a wonderful job,
hmm,
but still to this day doesn't say I love you very comfortably to me. I know very well he loves me. I
yeah,
know it, but he doesn't say it. And we've talked about it. We've challenged it. And I told my son this, and he says, well, he says it to me. I was like, yeah, for you, he's grandpa. There's a difference. And so we've
yeah,
talked to it. And then he says, well, you say I love you. And I said, yeah. He's like, and you're helping other dads say I love you too. And I said, yeah, that's what we're doing,
hmm,
And so I think we're in an uphill battle. Um, we're doing it at the pace that any good revolution should be done, which is consistently and maybe slowly, and maybe things happen at big jumps. I think there will be a
Yeah,
moment
yeah.
where there's a bigger movement. But I think that we look for allies, we become allies, and we also we share what we do. I mean, my friends are all very well aware of Journeyman because I, it's super
Hmm.
important to know that not only are we
Absolutely.
doing the work, but we're living it. My kids, my
Yeah,
boys are
yeah,
going to be different men than our generation, as I'm sure your kids are as well.
yeah. Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Absolutely.
We can only hope and
They'll
see.
have their own problems.
Ask me that in 20 years.
They'll have you'll appreciate this. I used to work at a hospital with 7 or 8 other psychologists, and I was the newest. They were all around much longer. They're all women. They're all moms. And we were joking once about how when my wife first got pregnant and I was about to be a parent, obviously clinical work stopped. We stopped talking about clinical. We all started talking about parenting. And a bunch of these psychologists, experts in the field, all said to me, which I thought was so telling, is we try so hard not to screw our kids up the way our parents screwed us up, and then we screw them up in a different way. And the reality is we're
Yeah.
not perfect. We're gonna, the idea is we have to have these solid foundations so that when we make mistakes, we have a foundation back. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
more important to fix and
Yeah,
repair than it is to do it right.
yeah,
You
for
know,
sure. You can't learn otherwise, eh?
exactly. So yeah, that's been
Yeah,
the whole thing. So I think more talking, more getting people out there and challenging people to be connected.
absolutely. And I think, as I said, look, I know I can definitely see it. Certainly in the last kind of 2 years since I've started my journey into this, and certainly from the podcast perspective, taking it on for me is I guess the way I need to raise awareness about it, and try and help that change and that movement happen that little bit more. But with that said, I couldn't do the podcast without the amazing guys who have come on and shared their stories, and without lads like yourself willing to give up your spare time, and jump on and have a conversation with me about it, because it's for me it's one of the most important conversations we can have at the moment. Men are in crisis. We are, as men, we're dying at an alarming rate due to
Yeah.
suicide. We make up 75, 78% of the global suicide rate. Um, and there is a correlation between men not talking, and the suicide rate. Absolutely, there is. Um, so we definitely need to, as I said, just have that open conversation a hell of a lot more. But without guys like yourself, Jason, coming on the show and talking about this, I wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I wish you nothing but the best for Journeyman. Um, I hope you have all the success, and best wishes to all the guys that are in the group.
You know what? I'm going to pass that along. I'm going to see them tomorrow. When I share your podcast.
Good
But
stuff.
I will say, just to finish off with it, I would hope that anyone who's listening to this knows that without a shadow of a doubt, the work that we are all doing as men, whether it's sharing stories, connecting, doing coaching or therapy,
Hmm.
it is without any exaggeration saving lives. And there's
Absolutely.
nothing
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And thank you for ending on that one. I really appreciate it. And again, Jason, best of luck with
Thank you.
everything.
You too, Matt. I'm really. Let's continue the conversation sometime soon.
Absolutely.
All right.